welcome to Excel Civils Academy. My name is Uday, and today we are meeting here to discuss the history questions from the recently conducted mains for 2022. Before I go into the individual questions, first a brief analysis of the overall nature of history questions. How many questions have been asked in the section of history? There have been 6 questions that have come number. So the total cumulative marks is coming somewhere around 75 marks, and that has been the usual trend since last few years. So on the basis of amount of marks, it's the same. There is not much of a difference. The second point that we can notice here is the level of difficulty. This time I'll say the questions were quite straightforward. Although they were coming from unconventional areas, you don't expect that they would have asked question from this area. But the level of difficulty, I'll say not very easy, at the same time not very difficult. I'll say somewhere around a medium. But then there is a problem with medium or easy kind of questions. If question is difficult, the content for that answer, writing a content for that question is difficult. There you will get awarded for the points that you write. But then the problem with such kind of questions, when the question is either easy or medium, everyone will have the same, almost all the same content, yes or no? Because these questions come from standard textbooks. So there is no problem in the content. So if you really have to score some extra points or some decent score, here apart from your content, what really matters is your presentation. That is how many dimensions you are able to show, how many different dimensions you are able to show, and what kind of a structure, that is, are you giving that headings very clearly, and if possible, if you are putting some kind of a chart, a flow chart, a diagram, a map, any of these things. Because again, if the question is difficult, the content will get that mark, will give you marks. Whereas when the questions are something very standard from textbooks, now apart from content, you will have to use some kind of these things, extra efforts from your side. So on this, I will say it is a medium. Third aspect in the general discussion for the questions is that the distribution of the questions. Distribution of the questions. In history, we generally have 6 modules: ancient India, medieval India, art and culture, world history, post-independence, and modern India, modern India. These are the 6 components. Now if you see this, ancient and medieval are especially for prelims, so you really don't have them for mains. But art and culture is one area which is there for both pre and mains, and here this year they have asked 3 questions straight from art and culture. That was slightly painful, but still there is no escape. You will have to do your art and culture. Unfortunately, one area which they have not been concentrating was world history, and they did not give a single question. And maybe there is one reason for this, is in the essay which was conducted just a few days before that, there was a question in the essay asking you about history is a series of victories of the scientific man over the romantic man. So probably that is one reason, and in this essay you can actually dump a lot of questions, a lot of references from world history. That is maybe one reason why they did not ask any questions from the world history section. Post-independence, they asked one question from post. That was a very, very straightforward question. Again, directly from your standard textbooks, you can go and dump the information over there. Whereas in modern India, 2 questions have been asked. So 3 plus 2 plus 1, total 6. So modern India, you will say 2 questions have been asked, but unfortunately both the questions have come from unconventional areas. You don't really expect questions from those areas, but yes, they did ask. And what is surprising with respect to modern India is, generally they would ask a question, at least one question from the national movement part, but this year you don't find a national movement part. They asked one question on economic impact, and another question came with respect to the military combats between the British company and the Indian rulers. So this was the general analysis for this year's question paper. The number of questions, how much weightage, the level of difficulty, and the distribution pattern across the modules. So with this, let us start getting into each of these questions one by one. And let us do it very briefly. Okay, let us see the first question. If you see, this is a question from Art and Culture. And the question reads like this. How will you explain that medieval Indian sculptures, how will you explain that medieval Indian sculptures represent the social life of those days? How it is representing this? Simple. Again, you can clearly see it's a straightforward question from Art and Culture. As I said, content, you cannot create new content. Okay, whatever is there you will have read, you should have go and dump it. But then the way you present it is what is going to matter here. And definitely the challenge is not on the content but on the presentation, as I said. So if you look at this, the words, if you see, first of all they are asking you about medieval times. And then if you look at this word Indian, just before I go there, it is a 10 marker. You should always be careful about that. 150 words you can understand. Literally you don't have space to go and express yourself in a very, very elaborate manner. You will have to be very crisp in 150 words. Only that you need to show more dimensions, as I just now said. Medieval Indian sculpture. Now very clearly that it is not sufficient you can simply talk about sculptures. No, you need to tell how these sculptures are going to represent your social life. So let us see some aspects what we can do. Now medieval India, first of all in introduction you can simply say that this was a phase in Indian culture, Indian art, history of art, where we find a glorious, some try to use some big words like it's a glorious period for Indian art and architecture, where it saw a lot of developments in various religions. For example, in this period you will find different religions in this country: Islam, Islamic people, the Muslims, the Hindu traditions, the Jains, the Buddhists, and all these people are there. But in this period, if you will see, sculpture is something Islam doesn't have much contribution towards the sculptural art. Why? Because in Islam they don't like idolatry, that is, they don't worship or do, and in fact they don't like representation of humans in the form of any idols or something. So essentially Islamic architecture will not, the sculpture, you don't have any specimen to say. So when you write this point, you are actually conveying a very, very important information to the examiner. Why? Traditionally whenever you study ancient India, medieval India, medieval is associated with which rule? Muslim rule. But Muslims, do they have sculptures? They don't have sculptures. So generally we find students writing all these aspects. There is nothing wrong. You must focus here only. But still the problem is at least one line of mentioning of Islam will be because it is associated with medieval India. Okay. And now again, among these three traditional religions that were there from ancient times, Hindus and Jains, you will find definitely they had a lot of sculptural art. Unfortunately, by the time Buddhism had declined in ancient times only. So even one more line, that Buddhism, which had great sculptural traditions in ancient India, had declined by the medieval times. So you really don't find much contribution from the Buddhists in this period also. So if you can give this clarity in the first 1 or 2 paragraphs, already the examiner will understand that you have, how many dimensions have you dealt here? 4 dimensions. Why? Because he is asking you Indian sculpture. He did not ask you Hindu sculpture or Jain sculpture. All are Indians. So you can definitely say 2 religions you don't find much. Only 2 religions, Hinduism and Jainism, you find more of sculpture. That itself will try to indicate to the examiner your breadth of understanding, that you know more dimensions. And once you have given this, all the other 4 aspects, the rest of the answer you can simply concentrate on going and giving examples for the Hindu and the Jain sculptures and how these actually represent the social life. Now, for example, when you are writing now you will go ahead and write about Hindu and Jain. Again, between these two, obviously you will expect that Hindus will have a greater amount of sculpture, whereas in Jains you can simply give a small example over there, that with respect to Jain, these people have a very beautiful set of temples called Dilwara temples, which are in Rajasthan, and these temples will have a great sculptures of their Tirthankaras, sculptures of Tirthankaras. Tirthankaras are the religious leaders of the Jains. So there you will really find, and most of these sculptures were made of marble. And now you see, because these temples are themselves made of marbles, and white marble, different raw material. Even Hindus made a lot of sculptures, but their raw material is different. They used to make mainly with stone, granite and all these things, but here they will use a lot of white marble. Then, so Jains we really don't have much example, but then now is it sufficient that you write what sculptures? No, what is the question asking you? Sculptures, how do they represent social life? So you need to leave one more line here, more than the raw material. What you really want to intend here is, what do they want to show with the sculptures of Tirthankara? How do you, if you just imagine one sculpture you have seen in your life, either in an image or anywhere, you will see a Tirthankara is always sitting in a meditative posture. So what are they really trying to convey to the people? What is that idea? What is that social element there? So they are portraying, you can simply write one line there, that they are portraying, these sculptures are portraying the qualities of an ideal person, according to Jainism. A person who is peaceful, who is calm inside, who is peaceful with outside world, no violence, and all these elements you can simply write. Again, you do not have space to go and elaborate and write many things. Right now our task is to show as many dimensions as possible. Okay, that is one aspect you can say about Jainism. Coming to Hinduism, you can write that generally in Hinduism, I said these questions, content, every one will almost have the same content, the presentation, that's why I put a chart over there. In Hindus, if you can recollect from your architectural part, there will be North Indian temple architecture and South Indian temple architecture. They are different architectures. North Indian is called Nagara style, and the South Indian will be called the Dravidian style. There is another also Vesara, but here again that space will not give us so much. Here in Nagara, there are one particular example you can give, the Khajuraho Temples in Madhya Pradesh. Khajuraho Temples in Madhya Pradesh. There you have a lot of sculptures which are erotic positions, erotic sculptures. Now you will think, what was this eroticism being depicted? So it is not about sculptures. They are asking you, how does it represent social life at that time? So essentially they were trying to highlight the importance of Grihastya Ashrama. Grihastya is, in ancient India we study that there is an ashrama system, the four ashramas, Brahmacharya, Grihastya, Vanaprastha and Sannyas ashrama. On that, they are actually trying, when everyone will become a mystic, everyone will go and become a sannyasa, who will run the society then? Naturally, to draw people back to Grihastya ashrama, this was highlighting the importance of Grihastya ashrama. That is, married life is nothing really wrong. Okay, so they are trying to convey some meaning through these sculptures. And again, don't try to go and write Khajuraho temples were built by Chandela dynasty in so and so century. That is not the demand here. They want to see whether, looking at these sculptures, can you bring some, can you connect it to the social life at that time? That is what they are really trying to see there. So one example on this side, one example on Jain, a few examples in the Dravidian style. Particularly you will go to Cholas, because that was a period, medieval India, with Cholas you will have, and Cholas had a very beautiful tradition of having sculptures of Cholas. You can say a bronze sculptures of the Hindu god Shiva in the form of Nataraja. Nataraja. And what is the information that we get from this sculpture? Is again that two elements that you can get is, once you can understand the idea of dance form. Nataraja is like the king of dance. So this is trying to show that dance was quite famous in those times. And you can also say among the Cholas, I am writing on the top, among the Cholas, second point you can say, they were not only sculptures of gods, but they were also sculptures of kings, particularly one person, Raja Rajeshwara Chola, Raja Chola, he also had his own images, sculptures carved, and his statues were there inside the temples. Now why will king want his own statues to be kept inside the temple? There should be some relation to the social life. Yes, the main purpose you can write in one line that it is to show that your king is close to whom? The gods. So that will give some kind of authority for the king over the people. So the main logic behind doing this was to gain political legitimacy for the ruler. Political legitimacy for the ruler. To gain acceptance by people. So you can clearly see, you can highlight different aspects of the social life. And from Davidian style, you can also give one more example, last example. Again, you'll have to keep in mind, it is all 150 words, okay. You can't go and keep writing all points. In Karnataka, you will have a lot of temples, particularly they were built by the Vijayanagara Empire. And here, they used to have, even in prelims, some 1 or 2 years ago, they asked a question that was related to some concept called Mandapa. Mandapa is a kind of an open platform in front of the main temple, okay, where some activities are performed. And if you look at these mandapas, there you will find a lot of sculptures. Particularly there is one mandapa called Ranga Mandapa. Ranga Mandapa. And in these mandapas, what used to happen, you will find a lot of sculptures which are showing you these sculptures having a lot of musical instruments, and they are in different dance postures. They are using different musical instruments and dance postures. So this is how you can try to connect politically. Some rulers are using this, religion, they are using gods. Social life, you can see that musical instruments, dance positions, and they are trying to convey the ideal personality of human beings. So these are certain aspects. So if you just go on writing the number of sculptures, your answer will obviously not carry that weight. You need to bring out the different dimensions, trying to show that yes, this is trying to depict this, this is trying to depict that. So that is how you can go forward and write an answer. And essentially, for every answer, you need not write a conclusion per se. Okay, and here if you really wish to add a conclusion there, you can say that yes, all these things, you can also add in conclusion that all these things in those days, sculpture, when you look at a sculpture, right, is not simply some stone carved into a shape. In conclusion, you can say, in those days when education, literacy was very low, sculpture itself became a means of communicating ideas to the people. Entire stories were put on the walls of temples and all these things. So that's how importance of the sculptures you can say and end the answer.